November 1996. An Isle of Wight teenager, Damien Nettles, is out having fun with his mate on a windy, rainy night. He buys cider, crosses on the ferry, tries pubs, then parts ways with his friend. Then CCTV catches him entering Yorkies Chippy, incoherently struggling to order chips, words simply failing him. His behavior deteriorates fast, mumbling about people watching him. Then he's last seen at midnight eating chips on the high street alone. He never makes it home. Rumours swirl immediately through cows. He was killed by a local drug dealer over a cannabis debt, but nobody talks. 30 years later, the silence persists. Who killed Damien Nettles? Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us. We release a new case every Sunday at 6 p.m, so hit subscribe and don't miss the next one. And let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Damien Richard Nettles entered the world on June 21, 1980 at the Gleneagles Hospital in Singapore, born to parents Edward and Valerie Nettles. He grew up with an older sister, Sarah, whom he adored and shadowed everywhere as a little boy, along with his younger siblings, Melissa and James. Eventually, the family found their home on the Isle of Wight, settling into an idyllic life surrounded by loved ones and friends in the peaceful seaside town of Cowes. Their family home stood on Woodvale Road in Gurnard, a place of warmth, laughter, and ordinary joys that would soon be shattered beyond repair. Damien's family remembered him as beautiful, those big brown eyes full of light and warmth, endlessly endearing, bursting with character. He was the family joker, always coaxing smiles and laughter from everyone around him, and he carried not a single malicious bone in his body. Sensitive, caring, deeply thoughtful, he was the kind of child who instinctively rushed to defend the underdog, even when it left him bruised or overlooked. He spent his childhood in Cowes, attending the local schools where he was genuinely well liked by classmates and teachers alike. Staff recalled his energetic way of moving, his arms and legs flailing in enthusiastic bursts, but no one ever minded. His gentle spirit made him impossible to dislike. Music took hold of him early and never let go. He played trombone and proudly joined the school orchestra, taught himself guitar in stolen moments, scribbled lyrics in notebooks, and jammed with friends in a band they'd just created. By his mid-teens, Damien had grown serious about his future. He enjoyed helping his older sister Sarah with her A-level work, poring over books together, and dreamed openly of university and a degree in marine biology, a future full of discovery and the sea he loved. To friends and family, he was a big, gentle giant, gregarious, endlessly happy, the undeniable life and soul of every gathering, a young man whose whole life stretched out bright and open ahead of him. At 16, he already stood approximately 6'3" tall. His closest companion was Christopher Boone, also from Cowes. He had shared a long-term relationship with Abby Scott that lasted 18 months, but it ended in July 1996. Abby later reflected that something subtle shifted in him after that. He began spending time with older crowds, holding parts of his life back from her. In hindsight, she wondered if drugs had started to creep in. There were only faint traces of occasional cannabis use in the months leading up to his disappearance, with his dealer letting him down from time to time, but nothing indicated heavy involvement or anything beyond what many Isle of Wight teenagers dabbled in during the mid-1990s party scene. It was the half-term holiday when Damien stepped out on that fateful night. He had only just returned from his girlfriend in Suffolk. She was due to visit him on the island soon, and he was said to be very excited about that, his anticipation palpable. On the 2nd of November 1996, Damien had plans to go to a party with his best friend, Chris Boone. His typical curfew was 10:30 p.m, but tonight he had been granted a later curfew of midnight. Outside was fiercely windy with rainy spells. Sometime that afternoon, his father Edward dropped Damien to Christopher's home on Fellows Road, Cowes. At around 7:10 p.m, Damien and Chris arrived at the small house party in East Cowes, with Damien the only single person there amongst 3 other couples. Christopher's younger brother David was also present and one of the couples. At some point, Damien left the party, and it is suspected he had gone off to seek drugs from his local drug dealer. It is unknown which or what type of drugs he sought, or indeed if he was successful in getting any. At 9:15 p.m, Damien and Chris decided they were leaving the party as it was more of a small gathering which they had become bored with. He is seen leaving the party with a black camera, possibly borrowed from someone there. At 9:30 p.m, they stop at All Day's supermarket in East Cowes. Damien then purchases them some cider from the off-license because his height made him appear older. He bought them special red cider. At 9:45 p.m, the pair take the small ferry from East Cowes across to West Cowes. Witnesses on board the ferry said Damien and Chris were chatty but did not appear overly drunk. At 10 p.m, Damien and Chris are seen at the Duke of York pub area. They then spend the next while attempting to enter pubs, but they are repeatedly turned away. Damien is fixated on finding his older sister, who he believes is out drinking in one of these pubs. Soon, Chris decides he wanted to go home. He was wet and drunk with no money, and they were not getting served anywhere. They walk up Park Road, and when they get to the steps of the park, Damien and Chris part company near the Granville Road and Northwood Park steps. Chris heads home, assuming Damien is heading home too. But between 11 to 11:10 p.m, Damien is then seen heading towards the Harbour Lights pub, where he asks a witness for a cigarette. At 11:15 p.m, he bizarrely begins trying the handles of a parked blue Ford Fiesta in the Harbour Lights car park, this being explicitly out of character. At 11:20 p.m, he then tries to enter the Three Crowns pub by the side door, asking for his sister, Sarah. It would later transpire she was actually on the mainland in Portsmouth. At 11:30 p.m, Yorkies Chippy on Cowes High Street captures Damien enter the premises. There are 5 off-duty military personnel in the chipper, and they exchange some pleasantries with Damien. In the years that followed, these men would be traced, interviewed, and eliminated from the investigation. Then at approximately 11:38 p.m, Damien begins behaving strangely. The CCTV camera captures him seemingly unable to articulate a simple request to order chips. He is described as being incapable of getting his words out. The staff would later claim he appeared under the influence of drugs rather than drink.
One, please. One what? One, please. One, two, three. Do I forget? Yeah.
Then between 11:45 to 11:50 p.m, he is back at the Harbour Lights pub around closing time. He then asks staff for a cigarette and is seen talking to someone in a Ford Fiesta outside. At 11:52 p.m, he walks back past Yorkie's fish and chip shop, waving in, heading south on the high street. At the same time, he boards a bus near the Co-op supermarket, asks the driver to go to West Cowes, but the driver tells him they're already in West Cowes. He then tries and fails to take the driver's photo with his camera, thanks him, and gets off the bus. At 11:59 at the co-op, Damien asks another witness for a cigarette. Shortly after this, a foster carer sitting in his car nearby describes a miserable figure huddled eating chips, who approaches, leans heavily into the car, looks drugged, then says, "They are watching us," twice. He wipes rain off the window and walks off towards the Pierview pub on the high street. And just after midnight at 12:04 a.m. on November 3rd, Damien is seen for the last time wandering along the high street, relaxed, eating his chips. This footage, along with other video, would be lost by police during the early investigation. On the morning of November 3rd, Damien's sister Melissa notices his bed hadn't been slept in. She quickly tells the mother. Valerie immediately became alarmed because Damien would always phone if he was staying out or changing his plans. Being aware of how wet and windy the night had been, anxiety sets in. She calls Damien's best friend Christopher, though he tells her they separated at 10:30 p.m, with him assuming Damien had headed home. She rings around to other friends, but again she finds no answers. And then at 3:30 p.m, Valerie phones the police urgently to report her son missing. But the police were apathetic and too laid back. They told Valerie to relax and that he was a teenager. He'd likely return soon. But she knew, a mother's instinct told her something terrible had happened. Critically, police initially classified Damien as a missing adult, mistakenly recording him as 19 in some logs, rather than a vulnerable 16-year-old child. No immediate land, air, or dog searches were authorized, despite family requests. Call logs from the night and records of officers on duty were later found to be missing or destroyed. The Nettles then took it upon themselves to go out searching the rugged terrains. They searched high and low for every potential route Damien might have taken, but they found nothing. They went out over the next few days with posters of Damien asking locals if they had seen their son. Then they discovered the fish and chip shop CCTV. Little by little, the Nettles were building a timeline of their son's last movements. Ironically, in the run-up to Damien's disappearance, the Nettles had been looking to relocate to mainland England and had been looking at houses in the South London area, but now they found themselves trapped on the island without their beloved son anywhere to be seen. After several days, police started to run search operations with sniffer dogs and Coast Guards searched the shores, but there was no sign of Damien. They consulted with tidal experts who worked out the area which they would expect Damien to wash up had he fallen into the sea, but he never does wash ashore. Police then went ahead and seized 7 videotapes from CCTV cameras along the high street. They signed and took them away from the local authority in charge of the cameras. On November 6th, a police officer agreed to show Damien's mother the tapes at the station, but told her not to get her hopes up as the footage showed nothing of relevance. To the mother's shock, the police had been tracking the wrong person in the CCTV. She did, however, spot Damien in the footage and corrected the officer. Weeks or months later, police lost those tapes and would attempt to blame the loss on the High Street Authority who had provided them. This was a crucial blunder that may have cost a case ever being solved. It would have shown who else was on the high street at the moment Damien left the chipper. Rumours of foul play by the island's notorious drug dealers began circulating almost immediately among Cowes teenagers and the local drugs fraternity in the weeks after Damien Nettles disappeared. Whispers quickly spread that the 16-year-old had crossed the wrong people in the town's hidden underbelly of dealers and chaotic addicts. Specific early allegations named a dealer called Bunny Iles as someone who had sold Damien drugs that night, while Damien's ex-girlfriend, Abby Scott, spoke of flickers of someone else and aspects of his life he kept secret that could have been drugs. Valerie Nettles herself became convinced her son had suffered at the hands of a drugs gang, noting that despite Cow's upscale reputation, there were people supplying drugs, and these persistent rumors of an argument, a spiked drink, or a violent clash with the island's notorious dealers plagued the community and the family from the very beginning. In the first year after Damien's disappearance, the Nettles family was left in a painful limbo, with virtually no development or meaningful movement from the police. Critical evidence was mishandled from day one. The case was never entered onto the HOLMES system until 2002, and the family was left without answers, without a crime scene, and without any official progress as 1997 slipped away. Then in January 1998, police were drafted in from the mainland to conduct a search of a wooded area near the Woodvale Estate area of Cowes. Damien's mother Valerie expressed frustration given that he had asked police to search this area in the early days of his disappearance, stating he sometimes used this route as a shortcut. A couple of years after Damien had vanished, his younger brother James, who had also begun dabbling in soft drugs, likely due in part by the trauma of his missing brother, had had a suspicious encounter with a notorious convicted drug dealer called Nicky McNamara. James and his friends had been hanging out in a shed smoking cannabis when McNamara had entered the shed. McNamara began talking to everyone normally, but when he noticed James, he asked who he was. When an associate told him that he was the younger brother of Damien Nettles, James says McNamara became very jumpy and agitated and told them all they had to leave immediately. In 2001, Damien's parents Valerie and Ed Nettles made the difficult decision to relocate with their remaining children to Dallas, Texas. The move was primarily driven by Ed's job opportunities as an international sales manager after facing unemployment and near loss of their home on the Isle of Wight, though it compounded the family's emotional pain as Valerie felt leaving the Isle of Wight meant distancing herself from the place closest to her missing son. The following year in 2002, the violent convicted drug dealer Nicky McNamara died of a heroin overdose. He had lay dead inside the bathtub of his girlfriend Shirley Barrett's home for days before he was reported dead to the authorities. Although it was discovered he had been injected with heroin into his back, his death is ultimately ruled as non-suspicious. In March 2002, the Nettles case is then handed to Hampshire Constabulary's Major Crime Department, where it is entered on the HOLMES computer system. A review later determined he was likely murdered, but the file remained a missing persons inquiry. In July 2003, police released a computer-generated age-enhanced photo of Damien of what he would look like aged 23 to the press, much to the dismay of the Nettle family, who firmly believe he was not alive. Then came a bombshell in the case. In 2005, a witness comes forward to the police and tells them that he had seen Nicky McNamara grabbing a skinny, tall, young teenager by the throat on the bend of Bars Hill around midnight on the night of Damien's disappearance. He said it definitely wasn't friendly banter and that McNamara had him pressed up against the wall aggressively. He tells police that McNamara was with another man named Danny Spencer, and that Spencer stood back watching as McNamara tightly held the teen. He assured that the teenager was Damien Nettles. It is alleged by other informants that Spencer had referred to Damien Nettles as a little cunt, and that he was said to have repeatedly stated to other acquaintances, "No body, no crime." In a later BBC documentary series on Damien's murder, a private investigator would claim that Daniel Spencer had somehow come into possession of actual witness statements taken by police from the Damien Nettle inquiry. It is said that he had gotten hold of the witness statement that claimed he had been present when McNamara had grabbed Damien by the throat. It is claimed that Spencer then aggressively confronted this witness, where a lot of shouting ensued. In 2007, Ivor Edwards, a private investigator, published author and self-described criminologist with a colourful background, contacts Valerie Nettles. He had been following the case independently and offered his services pro bono. He was blunt, direct, and made no apologies for his past. The family accepted his help, viewing him as a valuable addition to their efforts. Edwards attempted to raise a significant reward of up to £100,000 to encourage information, but this was reportedly undermined by police advising local businesses against participating due to negative connotations. He publicly stated that the police were unenthusiastic about his involvement, sending a constable to tell him they really don't want you to investigate this case. They then told him that Damien likely attempted to swim across the Solent to find his sister, a theory he dismissed as ludicrous, and despite this police intervention, he persisted. Over the next 5 years, Edwards conducted door-to-door inquiries on the Isle of Wight, particularly in Cowes. He would uncover new witnesses that police later interviewed. Edwards found witnesses who claimed McNamara was involved in Damien's death, one example being over a drugs debt or argument, with theories of the body being hidden in a known Cowes drug den off the Fellows Road and was kept for up to 3 weeks before being disposed of. One specific informant that he interviewed provided an account placing McNamara in Cowes High Street area on the night of the disappearance around 11:30 to 11:45 p.m. The following is verbatim from a recording of this informant. At about 11:30, quarter to 12, I was coming up the junction of Sun Hill in Cowes High Street. A group of males and one female came rolling out of Sun Hill as though they were a posse entering a cowboy town. Nicky McNamara was doing windmills, spinning around, and I said, "You alright, Nicky? You seem to be off your face on something." And he came out with some technical chemical name of whatever he was on. This puts McNamara directly in the path of where Damien was last seen on the high street. The witness also names Shirley Barrett as being part of the group, as well as another drug dealer named Jonathan Bunny Iles. The witness then says the morning after Damien vanished, he bumped into McNamara again in Cowes and asked him was he alright. He says McNamara tells him, "I'm a damned man, I'm a damned man." He described McNamara as looking really f***ed up. Later that day, the witness tells the private detective, "I see Nicky McNamara and he's chucking wood into this oil drum, this big 45-gallon drum. Fucking great blaze. This is about 2:30 in the afternoon. He's chucking this wood in, right? I seen that he goes back in and comes out with another bit of wood and he was scraping something along the ground. And as he picked it up, and he scooped it up off the ground, he then flicked it into the fire. It was the shape of a sleeve." The location of this alleged burning was at a house in Marsh Road, Gurnard, that would be searched as part of a double arrest of a man and a woman in November 2011. In May 2011, 5 men are then arrested on suspicion of murder. A 48-year-old man from Sandown, a 45-year-old man from Cowes, a 50-year-old man from Newport, a 37-year-old man from Ryde, and a 40-year-old man from Gravesend, Kent, in England. All would be bailed and later rebailed pending further inquiries, but then no further action would be taken against the men, with all of them being released without charge by early 2012. Then in June 2011, another man is arrested. This man is age 38 from the East Cowes area of Isle of Wight. He is arrested on suspicion of murder, aligning with the prior group, but he would be released without charge also. Then in November 2011, 2 more arrests were announced, bringing the total to 8. Daniel Spencer, aged 44, from Cowes, Isle of Wight, is taken into custody alongside a woman aged 35, also from the Cowes area. They were arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder, slightly different wording from the earlier murder arrestees. These 2 were specifically linked to an address in Marsh Road, Gurnard, Isle of Wight. Police searched this property in Gurnard shortly after the arrests. The search was for evidence of remains related to Damien Nettles, but no human remains, no significant evidence, and no charges resulted. The search was called off with a police statement confirming nothing was found. Both the arrestees were questioned in custody and released. In 2016, the BBC released a Bombshell investigative 8-part documentary series where they unearthed several new witnesses alleging slightly varying accounts that all pointed towards Damien as being murdered by convicted drug dealer Nicky McNamara. One informant suggested to the documentary makers that Damien had been taken to a chalet that night by drug dealers to be taught a lesson, but that he was never meant to be killed. It is said that Damien had owed money to a local drug dealer for 1/8 of an ounce of cannabis. He is allegedly then struck with a punch by convicted drug dealer Nicky McNamara with such force his head bounced back off the wall and he slumped to the ground, where he then drowned in his own vomit. He is then wrapped in a rug and black plastic bags. The documentary makers are then taken to a remote wooded land by another informant and shown a spot in this vast expanse where Damien had allegedly been buried. The documentary also interviews Shirley Barrett, a former friend and once girlfriend of McNamara, who it transpired had made a statement to police earlier in the investigation telling them that McNamara and another man had picked up Damien in Bering Road that evening, though she claims to the documentary makers she doesn't remember making the statement. Another informant tells the BBC documentary producers that he allegedly saw McNamara and others carrying out a large sailbag in the days after Nettles disappeared from 18 Fellows Road and placing it into a car. This house was a notorious drug den where 31-year-old convicted drug dealer Jonathan Bunny Iles lived and sold drugs. Damien's best friend Chris Boone also lived on Fellows Road and would admit decades later during the documentary that Damien regularly purchased drugs from 18 Fellows Road. Nicky McNamara and Jonathan Bunny Iles stayed at the Fellows Road address at the time, and it is claimed that Damien's body was kept at this property for up to 3 weeks before it was finally removed in the sailbag and disposed of. The BBC interviews Bunny Iles as part of the documentary with Valerie Nettles present, and he completely denies any involvement in Damien's disappearance.
Nettles' name never come into any of our lives until the day he started getting arrested. He never committed any murders or got rid of any bodies or had any involvement, anything like that.
They also confront Danny Spencer as he cycles to work and asks him if he knows what happened to Damien, to which he denies any knowledge of his fate. He also claims that the case has ruined his life.
What happened to Damien that night?
I don't know.
What do you know about Damien?
Nothing.
Tell me what you know.
Nothing at all.
Valerie wants her son back.
I bet she does.
Valerie wants the body of her son Damien back. This has been 20 years.
If I could help, I would help.
The case of Damien Nettles frustratingly remains a missing persons case, even though there is no proof of life. The family continue their media campaigns and appeals on each anniversary, but Valerie fears she will go to her grave not knowing what became of her beloved son. As of the airing of this documentary, there has been no new further arrest. Damien Richard Nettles was more than a name on a missing persons file. He was a vibrant, kind-hearted 16-year-old with big brown eyes, a contagious laugh, and dreams as wide as the sea he hoped to study. A gentle giant who played trombone in the school orchestra, jammed Nirvana riffs on his guitar, and stood up for anyone who needed it, even when it cost him. 30 years on, his family, especially his mother Valerie, carries the unimaginable weight of his absence, never knowing the final chapter of his story. May the truth one day surface, bringing the answers and peace his loved ones have waited so long for. Until then, his memory endures, not as a cold case statistic, but as a beloved son, brother, and friend who should still be here. Thanks for watching and listening to Damien's story. Please feel free to add your own thoughts, theories, and comments down below, and we'll see you next time.